Hello everyone, welcome back to Major Hi-Fi. I'm Luke. Today we're going to be talking about Kinera's Imperial Nanna Hybrid Electrostatic IEM. This is an updated version of their flagship Nanna model, which was already updated once into the Nanna mount, which was just a repainted version of the original model, though some people believe that it did sound different, even though Kinera said it was just repainted. But this one is actually retuned. It is the official stated retuning of the original Nanna, and it is known as the Nanna 2.0 Pro or Imperial Nanna. This kind of two names for whatever reason. And yeah, let's talk about how this sounds on its own, how it sounds compared to the original model, and whether or not it's right for you. So this one runs for $949, which is a little bit of a price bump up from the $899 that you'll pay for the original Nanna. Relative to how high of a price it is, this is not a huge bump up, but it is still more money. So obviously the purpose is kind of to upgrade it or, elevate the sound a bit to some extent. So let's see if it does that. And let's start out by unboxing it and seeing what's inside. To start, we have pretty standard 5 sets of rubber ear tips, 2 sets of foam ear tips, and then we also have a leather carrying case in here. And inside of this case, we have the cable, and this is a silver-plated OFC cable as opposed to the standard copper OFC cable we get in the original Nanna. This also has a 4.4 millimeter termination, which is not super common, but we do get a 3.5 millimeter and 2.2 millimeter adapter along with the cable. And then of course we have the IEMs. Let's just take a look at these. Per usual, Kinera never fails in the looks front. I mean, these are like so beautiful. I'm not even surprised at this point because they always look amazing. These have a kind of blue and red with this nice turquoise sort of fused into the blue part that sort of shimmers, as you can see when I turn it, and they have a very glittery texture going on the back. And then the rest of the IEM is just a standard glossy black, but yeah, overall very beautiful. A bit brighter of a presentation than the original Nanna, which is just more dark and subtle and purple and red or whatnot. So just a different look, definitely pretty bold. I like it a lot though. I think it's really pretty and very flashy. It's nice. It's a cool look. So these are a hybrid IEM. They have one 7mm dynamic driver, one balanced armature driver, and 2 electrostatic drivers. And they have a frequency response of 5 Hz to 50 kHz and an impedance of 60 ohms. Their output is plenty loud for casual listening or any music you might be listening to. If you are looking to use these to work on music, aka your unmastered song or whatnot, they might be a little bit on the quiet side. You'll still probably be fine, but you might want an amp just for those purposes. But overall, plenty loud, a lot of output from these. All right, so let's talk about how they sound. To start off with their soundstage, these have a very wide holographic sound. However, they're a bit more blended, but not in a way that feels crowded. It actually feels very intentional to me. So the layers are all given a good amount of space, but they still feel married to one another just on the edges. There's a nice, unifying, coherent sound to these, but definitely not the most intensely separated thing I've ever heard. There's a good sense of dimension, but it's definitely quite built and, like I said, connected. Each layer seems like it ties into the next one. Certain elements definitely were given more distinct separation. So if you listen to a song that has like a bunch of vocal layers or harmonies or anything where things are being really layered to kind of create a textured sound, it was able to feather those sounds out very well. But the overall composition of a song is definitely a bit more kind of tied together, but I found this to be nice. There's a lot of very intensely holographic IEMs on the market. There's definitely a big push to see like how wide can we make an IEM sound, but there's also sort of a sense with some IEMs that there's no reason to be pushing them, over the limit of, a normal IEM sound. Like there's plenty of width already in any high quality, earphone or whatnot. And these definitely do take it a bit further, but these just convey it in a bit more of that kind of semi-blended way. But like I said, it's an intentional, well-done blending, not that accidental sort of just sound falling over on each other, just very coherent, and there's not empty space left in the sound. Now that does mean that if you want that super duper intense, extremely cinematic sound where it just feels like each instrument is almost in its own room, then maybe these aren't going to give you that. But to me, the soundstage was actually quite pleasant and sort of that just subtly unique sound, you know, subtly different than other IEMs on the market right now, maybe in how it handled the imaging, not like dramatically. For the most part, it felt pretty standard, but it did have a kind of interesting angle I felt on the music, so I liked that a lot. Hey guys, Luke here. Just wanted to pop in and say that if you're enjoying this video, it would be great if you could subscribe and hit the bell to get notified when we make new content, and hit the like button and leave us a comment if you have any suggestions or questions or anything like that. I would love to talk to you guys more. We would really love some help growing the channel, and you know, just want to make sure that we're reaching our audience and whatnot. So yeah, any support is greatly appreciated, and let's get back to the review. So for their low end, these have a pretty strong, pretty deep response, though it's that very clean, contained response. So if you want rumbling and booming, these might not be the place to go, but if you do want a fair amount of low end, they have that to offer you for sure. So for example, these do have a noticeable sub response, but it's very cleaned up, very purified. You're not gonna get that kind of, you know, wild running sub sound, but you will still get the sub frequencies in there, just very selectively boosted. So very particular parts of it. It's not a huge sub sound, but it is present. And also just for a lot of the low end, I felt like it really showcased the attack and the dynamics of drums a bit more than the sort of like subby releases. So you'll still get a lot of impact, but it might be more on the attack than it will on that kind of dragged out, you know, big, like intense, deep guttural bass sound. Love to use the word guttural lately, don't I? Yeah, so it's got a good bass response, but very clean, very contained. If you want some more looseness, a bit more, you know, kind of like rumble, then maybe don't look here. But for the most part, it felt like a really clean, really well-handled bass sound. I think most people will be a big fan of the way that these handle low end. So the mid-range on these was really what sold me, actually. It's pretty boosted, especially the high mid. It's boosted and it's very articulate. And for me, that is normally a negative. I have so much mid sensitivity. I don't know how it happened, but I just do, to the point that a lot of IEMs, headphones, anything, I will EQ them to really drastically reduce the mid-range, specifically the high mids. I'm sure if you watch all my videos, you'll notice that I mention it at some level of criticism in almost every video. Maybe not criticism, but I always am like really zeroing in on the high mids and the mid-range. And these really surprised me because the mid-range is boosted. It's very forward, but it's so warm and so well sort of, you know, tailored that it doesn't feel harsh at all. It just feels really detailed and really crisp. And it has the edge taken off of it somehow. So we get a lot of attack, but it's getting rid of those kind of sore spots in the, you know, mid-range that some IEMs forget to tune out, and just pushing the most essential parts, so we get sort of the best of both worlds in terms of presence and, you know, timbre and a nice, pleasant, smooth sound. So for example, listening to even like really resonant songs. So I played the song Wolf by Scott, S-K-O-T-T, and this song is great, but it's very vocal centric, and the vocalist has a somewhat metallic voice, and it's very, very resonant. And so when I play on a lot of IEMs, they just push the vocal, which I love a good upfront vocal, but when the vocal's already leaning towards a little bit harsher, maybe in the mix, then any extra pushing can kind of just push it over that threshold. For these, it did push it forward. The vocal felt even more forward than normal, but it didn't feel harsh because it was tuning out those frequencies while pushing the right ones. And I've talked about this with other IEMs, with how important this is, which is that if you want to push forward the mid-range, it's totally possible, but you got to do it really selectively. And I really appreciated the way that these did that with giving me all the presence. It wasn't subdued, but it was just really lightly saturated, and like that coloring helped cut those sharp edges. And then the way it was tuned helped sort of dull those, you know, sore spots like I talked about. All right, so for their high end, you're not gonna get a shine from these. They are not intensely like that hissing level of high end, but they are bright, but it's very, very warmed up, sort of like the mid-range, maybe even more so. I've been listening to the song Liz by Remy Wolf a lot, love Remy Wolf, and this song I've been listening to on some brighter IEMs and headphones, and I've noticed that it gets that really silky extra layer on the breathiness of the vocals. These don't do that. They do bring the vocal texture forward a little bit, but it's not those absolute highest frequencies that add that extra sort of, you know, really intense sheen to the vocals, but they do brighten them up a bit, but it's not to that highest extent, and it's not boosting the absolute highest audible frequencies too much. But because they aren't boosting those frequencies and are focusing a little bit further down the frequency spectrum on the high end, we get some added percussiveness and a lot of great detail in those areas, you know, the really snappy areas of the frequency range. So once again, paired with that mid-range, these excel in definition to the nth degree. And also similarity is that they're able to, once again, push things forward but not create that harshness in a really pleasant way. So you get all the definition, none of the pain. So I really like listening to these, very easy on the ears, and the high end was a really, really well done high end for, you know, any IEM, whether cheap or expensive. All right, so let's talk about this, which is the flagship Nanna, and how does it compare to the Imperial? I'm sure you're wondering, and so was I when I got my hands on these. So I did compare them, and the differences overall are very subtle. And I'm talking, I had them both plugged into different audio sources, and I was like, you know, one over my shoulder, switching back and forth and back and forth. It's not an obvious difference, but there is a difference. So I'm gonna tell you what I heard. I'm going to tell you that it is subtle, it is not huge, but I think the price difference, which is $8.99 versus $9.49, it's about on par. You're getting about 50 bucks of extra sound quality, which relative to their prices is not a ton extra, but you know what? It is, you know, supposed to be 50 bucks of extra refinement, and if that's not over your price range, then maybe go for it. But let me tell you what I heard, because I don't think it's a matter of better or worse generally, but it was just subtly different, and there could be people that prefer either one. Okay, so for the Soundstage, maybe a tad bit wider on the Imperial version. I can't confidently even say that, but it might have been somewhat different. Some other coworkers noticed a bit more than I did. But personally, for my ears, the sound stages felt about on par with one another. For the low end, I felt a little bit more rumble and kind of depth from the Imperial, just a little bit further reaching, so a bit more of that kind of booming, slightly cinematic sound from the Imperial. Once again, not drastic, I kind of want to reiterate that with every point, but it was there. That was a noticeable thing. It did take me a while to notice it, but once I did, I kind of couldn't unhear it, you know? All right, so the mid-range, I started to notice more differences on. It's definitely cleaner in the Imperial version. It feels a bit more purified and sort of, you know, handled a bit more controlled than on the original version, which at times could feel just the slightest bit harsh by comparison, more so, not really by itself. But yeah, that more sort of serene mid-range sound does give this a little bit more warmth compared to the flagship model. And then the high end was kind of the most noticeable difference to me. It felt a bit more, once again, purified and kind of subtle on the Imperial version, and then just once again by comparison, because I really do love the original Nanna, so we don't want to put it down. But yeah, I got a little bit of sibilance on this when I sort of listened to the same song side by side. Get some sort of softer S's, and just the overall, that top layer of high end just felt a bit more cleaned up on the Imperial. So yeah, just kind of a little bit more of a tamed, understated, cleaned up sound on these, but definitely, you know, maybe not a totally negligible difference, but a subtle difference. Subtle, 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 you know, word of the day. But if you had the extra 50 bucks, like, yeah, get the Imperial version. If it's not out of your budget, then I would say go for it. It does feel like a valid kind of refinement, kind of, you know, subtle upgrade. And if you're gonna get an IEM in this price range, you might as well get the best version there is. And to me, this version was kind of the winner, but I don't feel like this one was the loser, if that makes sense. It still feels like really good and like it holds its own. But they are fundamentally very similar IEMs, but this one's just maybe a little bit more cleaned up and at a way or to a level that not everyone's going to notice. So if you're one of those people that tends to be nitpicky, you know, we're all nitpicky to some extent if we're audiophiles, right? But if you're someone who is, you know, even nitpicky in this world, then yeah, you're gonna want this one. But there's definitely a lot of people who probably wouldn't mind either one, and I might be one of those people personally. All right, so back to the Imperial Nanna 2.0 Pro. Overall, an amazing IEM, one of the easiest on the ears, like I said, just a really fun listen, and I think it'll appease even the pickiest listeners. It's just a really all-around great IEM. It's got a nice sort of overall neutral sound, but with some sort of unique takes on certain areas of the tuning and the imaging, and just feels like it really gets the job done right. and like it understands what a hi-fi listener wants. So I give these a big thumbs up. These are definitely one of the better pairs I've heard in quite a while, and I would really love to hear what other people think of them. I know they've already gotten a lot of buzz, their past versions, and I think that this one will continue that buzz. So yeah, that's all I have for you today. I also did a written comparison review of these two, which I will link to in the description. And if you'd like to compare either of these to other IEMs in this price range or whatnot, or other Kinera IEMs, I'll also link to the major hi-fi IEM ranking tool. Please feel free to leave a comment if you have any ideas for future videos or any thoughts on the Kinera Nanna, whether it's this model or past models or what Kinera might do in the future. I would love to talk and answer any comments or questions you might have. And yeah, I'll be back soon with some more reviews, and until next time, happy listening.